Last week we talked about the gospel where Jesus encounters the man who is blind from birth. We talked about the difference between what it means to be a disciple, to be open to what God has in store for us, and what it means to be an apostle, to go out and share what God has done for us. This week we're going to be looking at the third scrutiny readings from the Gospel of John. This is a story of the death and raising of Jesus' friend Lazarus. This is a very interesting story, and it's kind of an intense one as well. One that we can learn a lot from. There are lots of elements to this story. But one that I want to focus on for our reflection this week is Martha. Her faith, but also her doubt. Whenever Jesus is being led to where Lazarus is, Martha approaches him. Martha is Lazarus' sister. Martha approaches Jesus and says, "If only you had been here, this wouldn't have happened. If only you had been here, this wouldn't have happened." How often do we say that about God or to God? That if only God had been there, if only God had done something, this or that wouldn't have happened. But Martha goes on and answers her own doubt and says, "But even now I know that God will grant whatever you ask of him." So Martha has a moment of questioning, a moment of doubt with God. But she quickly answers her own doubt and knows that no matter what, God will handle the situation. This is an important example for us, especially for those of us who are going through difficult times, and those of us that are trying to deal with different kinds of grief. There can be lots of different types of grief, whether it be dealing with the death of a loved one, or the loss of a job, or an illness of some sort, or family difficulty. Whatever it may be, it's so easy for us to say, "Why are you letting this happen, God? Where are you? What is going on?" We can doubt so easily like Martha did. But we also have to have the faith of Martha, who knew that God would take care of everything. It says in the Gospel twice, actually, that Jesus was greatly perturbed and deeply troubled. The Greek translation of deeply perturbed translates literally in this instance to mean he snorted in spirit. Jesus was so incredibly angry at the presence of evil in the form of death that he snorts in spirit. He is even moved to tears. So no matter how much we despise suffering in this life, no matter how much we despise our illness or the death of a loved one or the loss of our job, Jesus despises it even more. So no matter what we go through in this life, we know that Jesus is right there with us. But again, this poses an interesting question. That if Jesus despises all this evil, and if he despises this suffering and death, why does he let bad things happen? This is a question that has been asked for centuries, and one that is still asked today by many of us every day. For many of the church fathers and many of the church doctors, like St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, they say that God allows these bad things to happen in order to bring forth a greater good that could not have occurred without this suffering having happened. This can be very difficult to understand, especially when we are in the midst of such suffering, when we are in the midst of grieving a death, or grieving an illness, or a loss of a job. It's going to be very difficult to try to understand the greater good, what good is coming out of all of this suffering. Father Robert Barron explains suffering in our life like this. He says that suffering is like looking at a picture or a painting, but looking at it in such a way that your nose is right up against the canvas, so that all you can really see are incoherent colors or streaks of paint. But it's not until you take a few steps back from the canvas that you can see the whole picture, that you can see what's happening in the picture. But we as humans, our purpose and our job is not to see the picture, the whole picture, because it would be impossible for us to always see the whole picture all at once. Our job as humans, our purpose as humans, is to have faith that the artist, the creator, is making a beautiful masterpiece. That God is taking our sufferings in this life and making something good out of it. It can be so difficult sometimes in our life to see the good things that can come from suffering. But we, like Martha, must know that God has a plan and that God can take care of everything. May we remember this Lenten season, that all of our pain and suffering that we may be going through is a part of a greater good, that God has a bigger plan for us, that we must take a few steps back from the canvas and see the beautiful picture that God is creating in our lives.